In this section, we'll look to re-implement our application with Redux. I've added another feature to our photo wall application, and that is the ability to comment on photos. Obviously, from what you learned in the last section when we talked about component state, you already know that all UI changes, including this comment that we just submitted, are rendered when you update the state. That being said, from here on out, we'll look to re-implement our code by managing the state of our application using Redux. Redux is an open source library written in JavaScript that isn't limited to just React, but works really well with it and allows us to better manage our application state. Now you might be asking yourself, I already know how to manage the state of my app with component state. Why use Redux? Well, the big thing to note here is that Redux and component state, they both aim to solve the same problem, managing your state. Why use one over the other? Let's talk about that in the next video. Hey, welcome to the Complete React and Redux course, where you'll learn to use these two libraries to build powerful and responsive web applications. React and Redux, two of the most powerful JavaScript libraries, are currently being used by companies like Facebook, Twitter, Netflix, and more. Mastering these libraries will make you the ideal candidate for high-paying front-end development jobs, as I will make sure that by the end of the course, you will have the confidence to build awesome web applications. This course is very project-based. All throughout the course, we're going to start from scratch and build a fully functional photo wall application. By doing so, you'll learn how to use JSX to build your user interface, compartmentalize your JSX into components, and use these components to form your entire web page. You'll then use React Router to navigate from one page to another, and thus build a single-page web application. You'll learn how to update your application state, and thereby update your UI with new comments and posts. And last but not least, you will link your application to Firebase, a powerful database that's going to persist all of our data. No JavaScript experience? No problem. I've prepared an ES6 crash course so that anybody, no matter the experience, can follow along with the course. I hope you're ready to join this new wave of web development. If so, I'll see you in the classroom. In the last section, we built the first page of our application, and in the process, we learned about managing component state to re-render your UI. We looked at some lifecycle methods and why they would be useful. I did promise that we'd look at more lifecycle methods, but not in this section. The main component of this section will be React routing, to add navigation to our website. Right now, our web page consists of one page which generates photos from an array, such that we can remove these photos. In this section, we'll add navigation to our application, such that the user can also add photos to his photo wall. In doing so, it takes him to a new page on our web application. We'll be using React Router to navigate between these pages. To be more specific, we'll be using React Router to build a single-page application. Well, what is a single-page application? What do I mean by that? To understand what that is, let's first explain what isn't a single-page application. When you visit your typical website, the browser would request the HTML associated with that page in the website from a server, and the server sends that HTML back and generates the UI for the page. As you navigate through the website to visit another page, once again, the browser makes a new request to the server sends back a response in the form of HTML, and the browser generates the UI for the new page you just visited, so on and so forth. For every page you visit, the browser has to keep making requests to the server in order to generate the appropriate HTML. However, with the React Router, we can create a single-page web application. What is a single-page web application? Essentially, when you visit a single-page app, it downloads the entire contents all at once in a single request. By doing so, whenever the user navigates between different pages of our app, the browser already has access to all of the contents of your next page. It doesn't need to grab it from the server and refresh our page. That is a lot more efficient, and we'll look at how we can create single page apps with the React Router starting from the next video. Hello everyone, I know that I promised that the previous video would be the last one of this crash course, but you must be aware of the spread operator before moving on with the course. We'll look at how we can expand arrays and objects with the spread operator. This will come in very handy once we start implementing Redux into our application, which is many sections away, but it's probably best if you learn it now. Alright, so let's talk about the spread operator. In this course, you're going to see the spread operator, and you're always going to see it behind an array or a collection of objects. Essentially, anything you can iterate through, anything you can loop through, that's where you'll see the spread operator. You can even use it with strings, but we're not going to do that in this course. We'll just focus on how it's used with arrays or objects. Alright, so we'll start this tutorial off with just arrays. So declare two arrays. Const names is going to equal John, Bill, and Sam. Some very common names here. And we'll declare another array. Const more names is equal to William, Paul, and Mike. Boy, I am not creative with names at all. Okay, so how can we use the spread operator on these two values? Why would we? Well, let's start with our array. What the spread operator will do is it will take every single element from our array and it expands an array into its elements, destructuring the array such that the elements appear individually. So if I were to start off by console.logging names as it is, I'm going to open up my terminal and npm run build. Forgot to save this. Okay, let's give her a try. And it prints out a normal boring array. Just a collection of elements. However, if I had the spread operator right before this array, what do you think happens? Let's rerun the app. npm run build. Forgot to save this. Alright. And notice how it expands an array into its elements. The brackets are gone. It's not in the structure anymore. It spreads it. So how can something like this be useful? Well, what if I told you, okay, from these two arrays, I want you to combine them. And between the two arrays, I want a string that says geo. So essentially what I want to accomplish is this. Have a resulting array that says John, or you know what? I'm just going to copy and paste them. No point in writing them out. John, Bill, Sam, and in between these two arrays, let me copy that. In between these two arrays, I want the value geo. But I also want to concatenate everything into one array. How would we do this with ES5? So what we'll do is we'll do it the old-fashioned way at first. We'll write let all names is equal to an empty array. And to that array, we'll concatenate this array. That's how we'll start this off. By writing all names is equal to all names dot concat, we're going to concatenate names. So what we're doing is we're appending all of the contents of this array into this one. Whenever you want to add another array to an existing one, you would use concat. So right here in this line, this array has values John, Bill, and Sam. All right. Then right after, we want to add in the name geo. So to append a string into our array, you would then write all names dot push geo. And now the array has values John, Bill, Sam, and geo. Okay, then after that, we'll concatenate the contents of this array. So all names is equal to all names dot concat more names. And now we have the value that we need, this one right here. Now let's go ahead and console.log it, just so that we can see this. Console.log all names, save your file, rerun the build, npm run build, and we get John, Bill, Sam, Gio, Will, Paul, and Mike. Now this is a huge mess. Already my code feels a bit too long. What if there was an easier way? Well, thankfully there is the spread operator, which allows us to do all of this in a single line of code. So let's go ahead and delete this and comment all of this out so that we can compare and contrast. And let's do this the ES6 way. So write const all names. Notice how this is a const because we're not going to be overwriting its value. And all right, we'll set this equal to an array, just an empty array. And what we could do is actually spread the contents of this array right onto this one by simply putting our array inside of this one, and then add the spread operator, like so. This expands our array. It destructures it and spreads its elements onto the new array. And now after the contents of John, Bill, and Sam, we can simply add Geo right here. Cool. So these are pretty much individualized elements inside of a new array. They're not in a collection anymore. And right after these three elements, we're adding a fourth element of Geo. And guess what? After Geo, we can just spread the contents of this array. More names. Names for everyone. All right. And now we can simply console.log all names. Let's check out our terminal. npm, oh, forgot to actually save this. npm run build. And we get the same result. John, Bill, Sam, Gio, Will, Paul, and Mike. Notice how much more concise this is. In the Redux section of this course, we'll be using the spread operator with both arrays and objects. All right, now I promise it is finally time to work on React. I'll see you then. So far in this section, we've covered the very fundamentals of UI rendering with React. There's still one more thing we have to do, and that is, instead of having all of these components in a single file, we're going to split them up into different files and export them all back into index.js, where they are still going to be rendered. But our code will just be better organized. So we're going to create a new folder component inside of source. Make sure any code you write is always inside of source. So create your folder components, and inside of our folder we're going to add 3 files. One file is going to be called list.js, another file title.js, and one more, main.js. So we've created one file for each component, list, title, and main. And inside of each file, we're going to import React from React, as well as the component property. Make sure to copy and paste it into every single file. And inside of list.js, we will copy the list component. So back to index.js, copy and paste that. Take it off from here, paste. Inside of title.js, we'll copy the title component. So take that out from here, put that into title. And inside of main.js, you guessed it, we'll copy the main component. That's rendering all of our subcomponents. All right, now inside of the main components, obviously these instances that we're trying to access, they're undefined. We need to export our list and title class definition. so that we can import and access them inside of main.js and create instances of them inside of our main components so that we can render them. To export our list and title components, for the list component, let's start with that. Simply export default, and we want to export the list component, like so. And for the title, do the exact same thing, write export default, and we want to export the title component. I can now import the contents of both of these files, which would simply be the components themselves. So import list from /list. So what we're saying is that inside of the components folder, go to the list file and grab the contents of whatever is being exported. In this case, our list components, and we're going to access it through this variable right here. Do the exact same thing for the title. Import title from /title. Once again, inside the folder, grab the exported contents of this file, which is simply the title component. And these are not undefined anymore. We're actually creating instances of these component class definitions. We're returning 2 instances of our list component and 1 instance of our title. That's what we want to render onto our screen. How do we render it? Well, same as before. We need to render it through the DOM, right here in index.js. So we need to export the main component from main.js. So export default, get rid of that, export default main, and now we can import the main component inside of index.js. Import main from /. We're going to have to go to the components folder /main.js to import this exported component and access it through this variable. And through this variable, we're rendering an instance of our main component, which contains these 3 instances of our subcomponents. So this is the exact same code as what we had a few minutes ago, except that now it's a bit more organized. If we go back to our browser, localhost 3000, I seem to have stopped my server at one point, so I'm just going to go back to my projects directory /photowall npm start. And everything works as usual. And that is all for this section. In the next section, we'll look at state management and start building up our photo wall application.